Hi, Vince.
Hello.
Can we stop for just a second and say happy birthday to this man? Because it was his birthday yesterday. And Vince, we adore you. I hope you had a great birthday. I know it was challenged, but happy birthday. We adore you.
Thank you. That was very nice. I
Did
was
you?
sequestered, but safe, responsible. Had spent time with the family, had a nice drive down the coast just to get out. It was nice.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
I think we all need to start. I love on Pinterest, they have all kinds of crafts that you can do, and they use things that you can use around the house. If you have an old roll of, not toilet paper, that's gold right now, but wrapping paper, you can turn it over and the other side is white. And you can make a big poster on a wall that you can write on, right? Make sure it's thick enough that you don't have indelible marker go through to your wall. But I want to start making a list of things that we're going to do when this is all over. And one of the things that we're going to do when this is all over is that we're going to celebrate your birthday with you. We're going to get our Vince party mode on. So yeah, here's Nancy.
Hi.
Hail, the gang's all here.
We're all here. We've got dogs too.
Well, I have one too, and this is just the speed at which we do things. But Nancy, if you want to turn on your camera, then we'll be able to see you and the dogs.
Okay, I'm gonna.
It's at the bottom. There you are, Miss Nancy. Hello.
Yes. Hello.
And anytime you need a moment of privacy for whatever reason, you guys, you can self-mute and you can do your camera.
Okay.
If you need to take a break from it all. But welcome to both of you. And Nancy, I was just about to cover our second story. I already talked about the new CDC prevalence numbers, but I was going to cover the second story, and I'm kind of glad that Vince is here to talk with us. Vince, there was a story that CBS did earlier this week about families that are home and their therapy has stopped, or they're struggling to keep their therapy during this time of isolation and trying to pare down their teams and desperately holding on to their teams when they can. And I'm so glad you're both here to talk about this, because this is a challenging time.
Yeah, we're one of those families, Shannon.
I was just going to say, I really wanted to talk about this with you, Nancy, and because, there's a lot of criticism out there. Obviously, we all need to be self-isolating as much as we can and participating in that. However, I just want to point out that, for instance, for people who are on dialysis, they have to go to the dialysis center, and the people who give them dialysis are working to ensure that they can have that medically necessary treatment. And ABA is considered a medically necessary treatment. Now, some families have made the hard decision, Vince, to stop. That fortunately their children are doing well enough that the family is saying, I think for safety's sake, we have to try this on our own. And that's a tough decision in and of itself. Is it not, Vince?
Yeah, it is a tough decision. I mean, obviously the decision's individualized based on the needs of their children, the needs of their family, and also, who they live with. What are the dynamics in which they live, right? Maybe they live with elderly grandparents or parents. Maybe they have a child or a family member that has a compromised immune system for, various different reasons. So there's a lot of decisions that have to be played individually by the families before they make that decision if they're going to continue with ABA or not.
Yeah. And I just want to point out that no one should be judging those families. If they have stopped or diminished ABA, no one should be judging them. And I want people to know that at CARD, we're working hard every day to get resources to those folks who've decided to go it alone, because we know how hard that choice can be, and we want to continue to support. There's all kinds of telehealth things that are happening at CARD to help support those families. But let's talk for a second on the other side of it, the families who have said, we believe that this is medically necessary. We don't think we're going to survive without this. We want to continue having therapists come to the home. And Nancy, you're one of those families that you are continuing, correct?
Yes, we're continuing, although we have some therapists that are not choosing to come.
Yes.
So
and that's all.
Tough.
That's a reality too, that each therapist and each BCBA and each person who is working with kiddos on the autism spectrum has the choice to decide whether they have the bandwidth to do this. And for some of the same reasons that Vince was talking about, if they have a family member at home who's immune compromised, it's not advisable for them to do it. But can we just talk for a moment about the heroes who have said, yes, I can, and yes, I will, who are still going to the homes? Because I am humbled by these people and how heroic they have been and the homes that they are going into. And every day I hear from parents, Nancy, like you, who have said, can you please get a message back to them saying this means so much to all of us, that it's the only way that we're keeping the wheels on and that we're keeping it together is that we have somebody coming to our house. How are you finding it, Nancy?
Well, I'm so appreciative of the therapist that's coming, his therapist that's chosen to remain practicing. And we've had some fill-ins too from other therapists that are willing to come do the work. So we're just incredibly appreciative, because Wyatt's had a really hard time with this whole concept, and he's had a hard time being out of school and being out of his everyday activities. And the therapists are very good about explaining it to him, helping him get a handle on the situation, and just helping me in general with some of his adjustments.
Yeah, because Nancy, I know that one of the things that you've always done is that you keep Wyatt busy.
Right.
He's got one thing after another that he goes to. He does therapy, and then he goes and he does his little league, and he swims and
karate.
You
tutoring.
like have that child, he's 18 now, but he has the busiest schedule of anybody I know, but it helps him to regulate his anxiety, right?
Definitely. Keeping him busy and keeping him on a schedule, which is something we've done. We've created a schedule for this time, which we're really strict about. He goes and looks at his schedule every half hour to see where he is. That's something we did with the help of our supervisor, who has still continued to work with us during this time, which has been invaluable.
Amazing. So Vince, is a perfect segue for you to jump in. We asked you to come today to talk about anxiety. Because look, if we're kidding ourselves and saying, oh no, I'm not having anxiety, can't we all admit we're all having anxiety and all of our kids are having anxiety? This is anxiety provoking. So Vince, I know you did a great PTA call for us the other night with the Card families and talked about this, and it was so helpful. So let's talk about some anxiety here. All right? I'm going to let you talk. I'm going to drop my camera out so that your camera is bigger. Here we go.
Well, I think the first thing is what you just mentioned is acknowledging and accepting that we are in a very anxious time, right? This is, COVID-19 is just, what I kept calling fire on top of the anxiety that we already are having, right? We already have plenty of anxiety, as Nancy was talking about. We have schedules, we have things that we need to, for our kids that, have different events and different activities and different things. They depend on that schedule for calm predictability in what their days are going to be like. Now, as we all know, everybody's schedule changed, not just our children. Our schedules have changed, schools have changed. Life at home is much different than it was 2 weeks ago. So for our children, especially many of our children who don't understand what's going on, they're experiencing higher levels of anxiety. Sometimes that leads to behaviors which just increases our anxiety for, how are we going to manage their anxiety. So what happens is we have that spiral effect that as our anxiety goes up, their anxiety goes up. And as our unpredictability goes up, their unpredictability goes up. So the first step, again, is just acknowledging it, acknowledging that we're all in it right now in an environment that is extremely unpredictable. We don't know what's happening day to day, but yet we can control only certain things. And that's where our focus needs to be, is on what are the things that we can control to keep some predictability in our own environments, in our own schedules. What Nancy is doing with Wyatt is fantastic. Create your own schedules, create your schedule at home, which might differ a little bit day to day, but it's then going to have something of a predictability factor for all of us, right? We're able to see what we're going to do next. We're able to plan out activities. We're able to plan out outings to go for walks, take the dog to the park, those types of things. Try to bring some normalcy to that schedule, right? Now, when we get anxious, a couple things happen. The first thing that happens is our minds start thinking of a lot of things as our anxiety and our emotions start to increase, right? So as they increase, we start to breathe a little faster, our blood pressure goes up, we start to think a little faster, and before you know it, we feel like we're a train going 100 miles an hour trying to figure out the world. What can we do to fix the neighbors? What can we do to fix our grandparents? What can we do to fix our children? What can we do? And we forget the one person who's in charge of all of that. You. We forget to take care of ourselves. And that's where it has to start. If we're not taking care of ourselves first, then there's the trickle down effect where our anxiety just creates more anxiety for all that's around us. So, in order to control what we can control, we start with ourselves. Let's start with ourselves. Let's help control ourselves. And the best way that we can do that, at least one technique in the very beginning, the very basic, is going back to the very basics, which is just breathing, right? Our breath and the way we breathe sends different messages to our brains. So if we have fast, rapid breathing and we're doing what's called chest breathing, so we're breathing just from our chest, which are more rapid, short breaths, we're sending messages to our brain that we are in an anxious state and we're heading towards fight or flight. Right? That's obviously not the message we want if we're trying to make decisions and we're trying to make resolutions to the anxiety and the problems around us. So the first step with that is let's control our breathing so we can send the message to our brains that we are calming, we're going into a problem solving state, we're going to be able to think cognitively, be able to work through things logically and reasonably. So the first way to do that is through controlled breathing. Now I can spend a whole lot of time on the details of it, but I'm just going to go through the very basics of the breathing. So it is a little bit systematic. It's not just breathing, because if we do it just on our own, we do those chest breaths and we're right, and before you know it, we are heading towards fight and flight, which is not the best state to be in if we're trying to make decisions for ourselves and for our families. So the first step to controlled breathing is breathing through your nose, slowly, carefully, slowly filling up your lungs, pushing up from your diaphragm until your lungs are completely full. You hold it there for 3 seconds, and then slowly release through your mouth, making a puckering with your lips and letting it out. Okay. The best way to remind this, to give yourself a visual, is you always want to smell the flowers and blow out the birthday candles. Right. Now you do those breaths 10 times, right? Maybe more if we're really anxious, but at minimum 10 times. 10 slow, controlled breaths will help you slow down your systems, slow down your thinking, be able to get yourself past past the emotional state and back into a cognitive reality to where you can now think through things. So this is a technique you can take anywhere with you, right? So if you're feeling anxious, you feel out of control, you feel that you need to control the situation, take a step, take your step aside, focus on your breathing, do 10 controlled breaths, just like we said, through the nose, out the mouth, right? And then you'll bring yourself back to a cognitive thought where you can then think your way. What is the best resolution for this? Who can I ask for support? What are my resources around me? And how do we proceed from there? Okay. It's a very stressful time right now. We're all in a very stressful situation, but we can control ourselves. And by controlling our breathing and controlling the way we think and relax or calm, I guess is a better way of saying it, that gives our minds and that gives our subconscious that sense of control, that you can control something. And then that gives us that confidence to be able to look at the other things in our lives that we can control.
Wonderful, Vince. And Nancy, you have the ability to turn your camera on and off whenever you want to.
Okay.
I just want to say, Vince, what a perfect analogy, the blowing out the candles, because it was Vince's birthday. And so many people are writing in and saying happy birthday to you, Vince. You are
Thanks.
so
Oh, happy
loved.
birthday, Vince.
Yes,
you,
it was
Nancy.
yesterday. And we shout out, we have a viewer who's watching from Romania. So shout out there. I got to say, Vince, this is one of the most amazing magic tricks in the world, because breathing is available to all of us at any point, at any time, and it's free. And yet we forget. We forget. Even when you were doing this with a group of parents the other day, you did this, and I could just feel the difference in the entire group from before and after, and I felt it in myself. Nancy, how about you? Were you doing the breathing just now?
I was playing along, and it definitely helped me. It's something that's so simple,
It's
but we
crazy,
forget
right?
about it.
I mean, right. And I think it's because breathing is an autonomic behavior, right? It's something that just happens, and we really hardly ever think about it unless we're running out of breath, right? So when we're running or we're exercising heavily, or maybe we're in the altitude and stuff like that, and our breathing gets a little different than normal, then it pops into our conscious like, wow, I'm kind of out of breath. And then all I did was walk up the stairs. And there's usually a logical explanation, like I said, altitude, or maybe you just worked out. But other than that, breathing usually stays within our our subconscious, and we don't think about it. And that's the idea here, is that is something that we can control, that helps us calm ourselves, because anxiety just raises our awareness. It's a self-defense. It raises our awareness, it raises our observations of our environment, and it prepares us for danger, more or less, right? But sometimes that's not the message we want to be sending our brains, because right now we don't want to be worried about danger. We want to be worried about responsibility, precaution. How can I best support my family? How can I best protect my family? And obviously there's tons and tons of instructions out there right now about how safely to do that, and we just need to access that information and use it to the best of our abilities. So panicking and keeping our anxiety high is actually not a defense. It's actually hurting us. So if we can control ourselves, get ourselves back into that cognitive thinking, we can think and problem solve through anything.
Yeah. And the fact that it's just, we talk a lot on the show about 3 breaths, but I got to say the 10 is exponentially better. But I still love that 10 breaths is going to take us a minute. So we can do it, and we can do it while we're driving. We can do it while we're changing a diaper. We can do it while we're talking to our kids. And just last night, we were talking to Karen Nolte about some of the research around coping strategies. And she was suggesting that when we do these things for ourselves and we model them in front of our kids, it's one of the best ways of teaching our kids. And that instead of what happens a lot, our instinct as parents is when our kids start to escalate, we start to give them orders and say, do your 10 breaths, do this, do that. And that in the moment, not the best thing to do, research says. When they're calm, right. But when they're starting to escalate, her research that she had collected together had said that the best thing that we can do is say, I'm feeling stressed, I'm going to take 10 breaths, and then model it for the child that's escalating. That was found to be more effective than saying to them, now you do your breaths. So we really have to put that oxygen mask on ourselves first. And I thought that was super interesting.
Yeah.
So Vince, we have a couple of questions that have come in. Are you in the mood to take a question or two?
Absolutely.
Okay, it's just a question of whether I can negotiate all of my technology to see. Okay, so the first one, my 4-year-old has always stimmed on my hair. It's mostly a comfort thing, but now he's even manding for hair. How can I change this behavior? It's okay, but only sometimes he asks other people. Did I lose you, Vince? I think Vince is frozen.
Okay,
Are you
so
there?
breaking up a little bit.
Frozen.
From what I
There he
understood, is that there's a child that's mandating.
Did you hear? so they're manding for hair. So he likes to touch mom's hair, and it's a comfort thing for him that helps him to reduce his anxiety. But now, as he's starting to mand, he's even manding for it, that he wants to touch her hair. And she's saying, it doesn't particularly bother her, but, he's wanting to do it to other people.
Right. So one of the things that they might think of, and again, I don't know if this has been something that's been recommended to them in the past, is maybe have a doll or have a different stuffed animal that has hair that's similar to real hair, right? So not something that's just matted, but something that might have real hair, like a horse's mane, or maybe a doll that has a hair that locks down, so that they can go ahead and pet that. And what mom can do is do that with them, show them it's okay, show them that they can pet this as a sensory outlet, because that's most likely what it is. As it feels good, it helps calm, it helps soothe, and be able to transition that stimuli from mom's head to the doll. And now they're not going to be able to do that without mom being able to do it with them. Show him it's okay, show them it's safe, show them it may be even fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that some kids have been taught to feel their own hair too, as a way to calm themselves. So that's another thing too. And then as kids get older, when they're taught rule-oriented behavior, he can be taught how to ask permission to touch mom's hair, and that it's not okay to ask other people. And because there's lessons, because this particular parent, I happen to know, Vince, is a card parent. So they can absolutely work with their supervisor to take this from, what you do with a very young child up through when he's older. So I would certainly say, talk to your supervisor, have them target this behavior, and how they treat it now for a little is vastly different than how they would treat it for an older kid.
Absolutely, and that's a good point. Age and level of programming that they're in now has a lot to play into that, and so that's a very good point.
Plus, we're in different circumstances now than we've ever been. So, okay, then we've got another question here. Hello, our oldest son, 6 years old, has autism. Currently, we feel like we're in a good spot with him and behavior, occasional issues, but much less frequent. However, since we've been getting his behavior more under control, our two younger children, 4.5 years old and 2.5 years old, really seem to be imitating his behavior, particularly our 4.5-year-old son. We really are at a loss of how to help them understand that there are behaviors that their older brother does that are not acceptable, and that he is struggling and that we need to help him. But he idolizes his older brother and wants to be just like him. Do you have any guidance on how to deal with younger siblings in these scenarios? And they said, thank you.
Yeah. No problem. Yeah, and that's actually very common, right? It's very common for the younger siblings to model off of their older siblings, just in general, right? And now when your older sibling has developmental disability, they don't know that some of those behaviors that the child's exhibiting aren't socially appropriate, or maybe aren't functionally appropriate. They just know that when that child is doing those behaviors, they get attention. They get a reaction from people. They get mom and dad's attention. They have therapists coming in to work with them, right? So they want that attention too. So it's more of a, oftentimes an attention-seeking behavior, but in a very, in a very innocent way. So the one thing that, just the first thing that pops in my mind is making sure that the behaviors address the same for all the kids. So if the identified a client or a child who has a disability is doing it, and there's a prescribed behavior plan for it, do the same thing for the siblings. Don't give attention for it. Make sure that they understand that that's not appropriate, and there's a replacement behavior. This is what you're supposed to do. One of the things we always recommend is that behavior plans and token systems and all of those are for all the kids at home, so there's that commonality and there's that sameness for everybody. Johnny's not getting treated any different than Jane or Timmy, right? They're all following the same expectations, which would be maybe no tantruming, if asked to put the PlayStation away, or or there's an expectation to clean up your toys after you're done playing with it. While that might be harder for our children, it's still the same expectation as what we want for all the siblings. And so one of the things to look at just in yourselves and how we're looking at the home, do we have the same expectations, or do we rely on the same expectations for all the kids?
Yeah. And in both our cases with Nancy, and by the way, we're welcoming Leah Hirschfeld, who's our next guest, who's joined us. Hi, Leah.
Hi, Leah.
We're just finishing up with Vince, the birthday boy, who we so appreciate. And but Nancy and I, both of us, we were only blessed with only children. So we don't have the sibling thing going on as much as I think both of us would have loved to have had other kids. We don't have the sibling thing going on. But I think both Nancy and I can attest to that all the families that we've met who have neurotypical siblings in addition to their siblings that are on the autism spectrum, while it's not easy, and I can't even imagine what you're going through, I can tell you from the future that those kiddos grow up to be the most incredible people on the face of the planet. That the skill set that they get from growing up with having a sibling on the autism spectrum, they are the most kind, considerate, caring, flexible people that I've ever met. When I meet somebody and they go, "Oh, I have a sibling on the autism spectrum," it's always one of those things of, "Oh, yeah, I could have guessed that," because they're real rock stars. So, Nancy, don't you find that to be the truth?
I think anybody that has a child with the disability, anybody that has a sibling, grows up to be much more compassionate and understanding of all situations. I mean,
and Nancy speaks from experience there, because Nancy's the perfect example of this. Nancy had a brother who had Down syndrome, correct?
That's correct, right.
And so look what that turned out. One of the kindest, caringest people.
We were always taught to view it as a gift, and that we were chosen as a family rather than being victims. So that's something you can instill in your children, that give them a sense of responsibility about it. Say you're special for having a special sibling, and empower them with that message.
Absolutely. Vince, we have to pivot now to Leah, but thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. I hope you get good birthday weekend vibe.
Happy birthday, Vince.
Thank you, Leah. Thank you, everybody. And, it was my pleasure being here this morning.
Wait 1 second before you go. I feel like we should all do a Brady Bunch moment. Like we should all look up and look down and look. Doesn't it feel like we're doing the Brady Bunch?
It does.
I want to be Alice. I want to be Alice, right? It's a Brady Bunch moment. Okay, thank you for humoring me. Bye, Vince. We love you.
Bye, Vince.
All right, thanks, guys. Have a great day.
Okay,
thank you. You too.
Hey, thanks for watching Autism Live. To subscribe, click here. And if you'd like to check out some more of our videos, click here.